Tell me what your life was like before you died.
Well, I was a fairly depressed person, I would say. As a kid in the younger years, I was happy. I felt like I was very connected to nature, and I had a sensitivity that I looked at as just natural as a kid. And then as I got older, our family had moved to another state. And then as I got older, I began to experience a lot of emotional pain that I didn't want to look at. And so I had suppressed that pain. And through my teenage years, I went back to California for college. And it seemed like all of that suppressed sadness was resurfaced. And so at that time, I didn't want to look at it, but I had my own way of coping, which was to go into do mountain biking and to go into the forest. And the trees became my friends, and the forest became my sanctuary. So that's how I coped. However, there was still that pressure, that imminent pressure of not being able to look at myself. And I felt like there was something wrong with me. And that became kind of an internal dialogue, basically. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. And it got so bad that I started to have a conversation with God, with the divine, saying, I don't want to be here anymore. Please take me. It's too rough. Please take me. It was the end of my second year of college, and I was looking for a job. I felt very disconnected from people. I felt like nobody liked me. Of course, it was a reflection of how I was feeling inside. I felt when you're feeling this pain, you feel like you're the only one on the planet that's experiencing. And that little did I know at the time that there's always somebody that's suffering more than you or going through a harder time than you, wherever that may be in the world. And I didn't know that then. I just felt like this is my world, this is my pain. And it was reflected, I guess you could say, psychologically or from the egoic mind. And so it was a culmination of the two, but it's still one and the same if you look at it. I was biking around town, little town in Northern California, and I was at that point, it was like, take me, God. And so about 4 days later, I went to the forest mountain biking like I had always done. And, it was just another day of being depressed, but also at the same time trying to find that peace and being with the trees. So I went into the forest. It was morning time. It was, kind of that June gloom in California. There was that mist that was coming by. It was in May. And then it was clearing. It was starting to clear. And I was probably there for a couple hours. And then I started to head back down towards town because the community forest was very close to the little town and to the college where I was attending. So I was familiar with all the trails, and I took a trail that was parallel to one of the roads and started to hit the jumps. I never wore a helmet. I didn't think it was a cool thing to do, really. Because I wasn't an extreme mountain biker, you're 20-year-old kid. So I take the jumps like I always had. And then the very last jump that I took, I noticed that it had been built up incredibly. I was familiar with it on past days, but somebody had built it up. But by that time, it was too late for me. I took that jump, and I knew once I was in the air that this was the moment, basically, that God had given me. It was like a quick knowing, oh, I'm dead. So I came down on my front tire, bam, handlebars, head, neck, and my body slapped onto the earth. And I was completely out at that time. There might have been a moment where I felt just a little bit of pain, but it was like I wasn't going there. I was out. So the next moment of what I had remembered is I was floating above the redwood trees. I can't say it was like an astral body projection. So it was just like my consciousness, my beingness. It was a moment where everything became quiet. There was a silence, and yet I was very sensitized to the elements around me. And I could feel the wind blowing through me. I could hear birds and I could hear dogs miles away, although it sounded like they were right there in my ears, barking or chirping. I could see like the crystals on the redwood needles of the trees. I could hear the ocean, which was several miles away. And again, there was this incredible amount of peace. And it was like, okay, here I am. But there was a familiarity in this space. It was like, this is who I am. I knew who I was at this place. And I didn't know who I was. I really didn't know who I was at all in that body who was so depressed. So when I tell the story, it's interesting because it's like there's all these moments in time, but it's not like time was real at all. And so I looked down and I saw my body, and I saw me all curled up on the ground there in the redwood forest. And It was like, okay, that's not really who I am. And I began to kind of enjoy the space of this peace, incredible amount of peace where I was. And at that moment, or at some moment, there was a question that bubbled up inside me. It wasn't like hearing a voice. I never saw any beings or angels during this experience. It was more of the presence of nature more than anything. But there was this direct question that came: do you want to go further, or do you want to go back? And I said, I don't want to die. And as soon as I said, I don't want to die, I was slammed back into my body. And there was an incredible amount, there was a heavy breathing, because I know that I must have lost my breath at that time. As I was breathing, I began to feel the pain. And it was a tremendous amount. It was a horrific amount of pain. Electrical pain. It was like a numbing, stabbing pain coursing throughout my body. And I'm not even really thinking. I'm just like, why the hell did I come back, really, basically? As I was experiencing this pain, simultaneously, I began to open my eyes the best that I knew how. Everything was a little bit blurry at that time. And that's when I began to have this experience with fairies, little fairies, like forest fairies, coming down from the trees. They were dive bombing me. They were giggling. They were moving around me. So they were basically like my little angels. And I believe that they were bringing lightness, that they were bringing love to my situation, or they were welcoming me back here into this earthly experience. So that was that. Simultaneously, I began to hear this amazing humming sound. It was like more than a humming. It was more like a symphony. I explain it as, the best way I know how to explain it is like a Tibetan singing bowl, where it's ringing this piece. And I knew it was from the trees. And I could feel this vibration coming into my body. And I believe that the trees at that time were healing me. They were sending that energy down and healing me. I'm just kind of like, what's going on? And then I kind of brought my attention back with my breath. And that's when I felt the pain again. And as soon as I started to feel that tremendous amount of pain, it's like something happened where I didn't want to go there. And I was out again. My consciousness went out. So the next thing I remember, I was woken up in the hospital by the doctor, who was asking me a series of questions. First thing I heard was, you're very lucky. You're very lucky. You're very lucky. You didn't die. You didn't break any bones. You're very lucky. And then he began to ask me questions. What's your name? I didn't know my name. What town are you? Where are you? I didn't know any of these things at all. And he asked me one question. He says, do you know any phone number? And I blurted out a phone number from a family friend in town. It just came out. And so I was released that day, actually that evening, from the hospital. I was given some pain medication. I went to my family friends. However, I was still experiencing a tremendous amount of pain, even though I was taking these meds. And so I stayed there for about a week because the doctor wanted me to rest. And so I stayed there for about a week before my mom flew down and picked me up. And I went back up to Washington State. I was very comfortable with what happened. Not right away. It took some time to get comfortable with it. But then it became an experience that was very sacred to me. And so I didn't want to have it polluted by other people's thoughts and polluted by what other people's opinions. So that's part of the reason why I had held on to it for so long. I didn't do research. I didn't even really know that people had near-death experiences. And I can't remember what the first one I heard. It was way out there. And then the first one that I had seen, I started to watch videos. And then there was more people that came out. And so I just I listened to more of those people that it resonated with me, I guess you could say. That truth resonated with me. Even when I was in Washington, I would love to go in the mountains and ski, or we had a county forest behind us where we had lived, and I was always in the woods. So it always was in a way you could call it therapy, but it was more than that for me. It felt like, and it still does to this day, that nature and the trees are my family. And I think it's reflective of that. And it's, if you believe in hell, then you might go there. If you believe in God, you might speak to God. So that makes the most sense to me, that it would be nature that was there supporting. There was an experience I had prior. I was seeing a woman. I was in love with this person, and my heart was very open. And I had an experience at one point when I was in her apartment. And this was still in the same area, where I had my eyes closed and I had I guess you could call it like your third eye vision turned on, or your inner vision turned on. And I did see them in clarity. I saw those fairies floating around. They weren't making any noises, but I could see like little sparkles within my vision at that time. So that was like my only experience I had about them. I mean, I had read about them prior to that when I was a teenager, but I never really explored it, or I never really did any research about it. I didn't so much question what I saw, and I think that more so the processing took a while. It wasn't immediate. I mean, I was so focused on my body pain and getting well that I wasn't like, what the hell happened? I did have a really bad concussion, so my memory wasn't all there completely. So it took a while as I started to get some therapies. It took a while for that memory to start showing me what was, first thing was my name, remembering my parents and my sibling, and then beginning to remember the actual experience that happened. I really believe that we're being challenged, like even today, to be of greater help to others and to help serve others that have gone through similar experiences. And it doesn't have to be the exact same experience, but it can be a similar experience. And being able to serve, to learn how to serve, and to learn to be authentic and to be real and to be there for people. So why does that happen? I don't know what the mechanism is. I don't have the answers, but I don't think I have to be, because really, I mean, we're all learning here. We're all learning what it is to be, a human in these bodies on Earth. We're all doing the best we can. So we have to give ourselves a break and just be curious, because life always gets better, and somebody's always experiencing something worse than you are. Back in 2000, I had learned quantum healing from one of the first people that actually did that. And so it had developed over the years. I had my own practice in LA and Florida and a few other places. People began to say, "Oh, I feel amazing. What are you doing?" I'm just doing body work. I'm not doing anything special. So then I began to kind of blend the two, you could say, of quantum healing and body work as I was touching people. And it has evolved to where I don't actually physically touch people, but I work with people remotely now. You could call it quantum healing, but I don't like to put a label on it. It's basically looking at where people need to, and it's not me doing it. I could say that it's basically, it's them, because they're ready to make a change, and it's that greater power that wants to help. So I don't necessarily like to take credit for it, but people do show up when they're ready to make a shift in their lives. Maybe, they're a spiritual seeker and they still have stuff going on from their past. So I can see what's going on inside the body, and I can see what's going on around the body. And the energy is very respectful. I could say it's source, and it's kind of attuned to this person specifically. And if they're ready to have a release in that area, whatever that area of resistance is, then they will. If they're not, if there's still a lesson there, then it won't happen. Most often, people are ready to have some kind of release, you could say, or they're ready to move to another level spiritually. And there's a space for that to happen when people come to me. My definition of living a good life is very simple. It's loving acts of deeds. I think living in Hawaii has really taught me that, because the people here are so incredible. Being grateful for everything, no matter what comes into my life, and seeing the gift. But basically just being able to serve without expectation, being able to help people without any expectation, and just doing it from my heart. That, I believe, is the good life. God is love. God is everywhere. And I know that can be kind of mental for people, but honestly, my experience with God is just having a conversation with God and being able to see that God is in everything, and being also curious and not knowing that I have all the answers, and that maybe someday God will reveal him, her, itself to everyone in some way. And I hope that happens for everybody. Find ways to enjoy your life, no matter what you're going through right now. And I don't know what that is for anybody. And I don't claim to be some know-it-all, but take care of yourself and take care of the ones you love. And you're already doing the best you can. So you might as well have fun along the way.